In case you don't know me, my name is Han-Wen. I work at Google in Munich. I lead the Gerrit team that is there, and we have more representation. Chung Cheng is also here. He's also from Munich. I'm presenting something work by an intern from this spring, and unfortunately he's not here, so I present for him. Okay, so here we are. That's Maxime. Maxime worked for Patrick, who's not here, on a topic which is our submission system, our submit rule system. And to understand why we're doing this, we have to go back a little bit to where Gerrit came from at Google. And so, of course, it started as Sean's project for the Android team, and so we ran Gerrit on a machine somewhere at the address review.source.android.com. And some people at Google noticed this and said, well, that's pretty neat. We would also like to have something like that. And so we also deployed a server for the kernel team at Google to use for their reviews. And of course, we wanted to have a server for developing Gerrit itself. And before you know it, we had a bunch of servers. And that's actually kind of a pain in the ass, because each server you have to configure, you have to make sure it's running, and just a lot of support load. So I saw many talks here about technology to make Gerrit scale better, and it had all kinds of complicated words that I don't really understand, like YAML and HA proxy and ETL and ELT. Well, we did something similar, but inside Google. So we used the Google alphabet soup, so I put it there on the bottom, to make a deployment that runs in our data centers. There's previous talks on it, so I'm not going to go deeply into it. But we have a virtual hosting system since around 2012. And by now, the operation is pretty streamlined. So what happens is that some team at Google wants to use Git for storing their source code. And our team is the officially approved provider for this service inside Google. And so they file a ticket for us. And then we run this command. So say you have a super secret project called Sapphire Skunk. Then we run this command to create the host name over here, Sapphire Skunk, at googlesource.com with you as the owner, and we can perhaps specify other requirements such that you can access it without an approved Google device. So great. So many of the problems you all are struggling with are no longer a problem. But as things work in life, as soon as you solve a problem and make things easy to use, you actually create new problems. Because when we create this thing, we say to our customers, well, congratulations. You're now the owner of a globally replicated, super fast, reliable 24/7 system. Here are the keys to your fancy car. And then they go like, okay, and now what? And then we say, well, just read the manual. Yeah, so, and if you buy a Ferrari, if you ever get to that point, it actually comes with a 250-page manual. And then on page 44, it explains you how to put the safety belt. So people have to read the documentation. And then as soon as they start reading the documentation, they're going to discover that it's not such a straightforward system to use. So one of the things that bothers people, or that people have trouble with, is a plethora of accounts and groups systems. So this is very specific to Google. But there's also permissions and configuring ACLs, and that may ring true to you. If anyone has ever studied the permission system, they will agree that it's kind of complicated. And also, if you read the documentation, you learn about exciting things such as the heading max object size limit and enable sign push. Should I enable that or not? Do I require a change ID? Should we reject implicit merges and create new change for all not in target? And their submit strategies, etc. And people that are new to Gerrit, they often also don't really know how to effectively use it. What is a good workflow? And since we're the team that provides the service and no one else, they come back to us and ask us, well, what do we do now? And unfortunately, we can't say, please, pay Luca to explain how to do this, because we're the team that provides this, and so we have to handhold these people, and so it takes a lot of our time. So I think one of the big challenges that we have, that my team has, is to simplify how Gerrit is used, because effectively we have like 500 Gerrit admins at our company, and none of them really want to be administering Gerrit. So yesterday someone said, well, we just want to, we want to, was it Luca? We want to, I don't want to work on software. I want to build with cars. And so if you work at Google, you want to build web browsers and you want to build ad serving systems. You don't want to administer the ACLs of Gerrit. So let's talk a little bit more about workflows. So in my opinion, there's two reasons that we do code review. So the first is that we want people to look at code and find the bugs before they go to production. But the second is that we also have policies. For example, if you're like a large company, usually you don't want people on their own being able to push things into production. There should always be another person, and so there's a policy that enforces this. And so, for example, when we develop Gerrit itself, there's a number of policies. So if no change can go in unless a maintainer has approved it. Our CI system must have said that it's good. And this is something specific to Gerrit. If you're changing a third-party dependency of Gerrit, then Google must also say that that is okay. This is because if we have certain constraints internally, and so if Gerrit upstream diverges from our internal deployment, then we can have problems. And so we don't want changes to go in that don't satisfy these rules. And so if you look at that more abstractly, there's a certain set of rules that are defined in the project. And there's a certain set of properties of a change that may or may not be submitted. And the question is, given the change and given the configuration, can I submit this change? And if the answer is yes, then great, you can submit it. If it's no, then the system should say, oh, you still have to get a +2 vote from this group. And so this type of question, given facts and rules, can I satisfy certain queries, called logic programming. And when Sean was contemplating this problem, he said, oh, logic programming, how do I solve that? I do that with a logic programming language. So I'm going to use Prolog. Here comes part. So when I was envisioning this talk, I was imagining that I would spend my entire flight here in the plane learning how Prolog works. I tried for 15 minutes, and I thought, okay, this is not a good use of my time. So I'm just going to focus. So here is something. Part of this rule says you need a non-author code review in this case. And a non-author code review, well, what's this? That's is defined in Prolog as this thing over here. And I think I partly understand what happens here. So R and A, you find all values for R and A where there's a commit. A is the author, and R is the reviewer, and R is not equal to A. And once you find something that satisfies this, you have the exclamation mark, which is the cut point, and it says, okay, you don't have to look further. And then you can say, okay, the requirement non-author code review is satisfied. That's what the OK is for. So this is quite arcane. And it has also something annoying, which is that something that is not actually a thing you can vote on, the non-author code review, is actually encoded here as a label. So it makes the UI kind of awkward. And so what happens in practice is that my team, the supposed authority on Gerrit, doesn't understand Prolog. And what that can lead to was nicely demonstrated 2 days ago. So in the middle of the day, some of our customers started complaining. And so someone took a quick look at the logs of our server and said, oh, it says something with Prolog. Did you change anything about your Prolog rules? Because it's probably you broke something. And they said, okay, yeah, we did. And so they reverted. And so like a couple of minutes after the errors started appearing, they reverted it. And so we thought, okay, great. Problem solved. We don't have to look at this. Besides, we're at a hackathon. I don't want to look at incoming bugs and email. And so we left this alone for a couple of hours. And then I checked my email again, and someone said, well, people are seeing errors in their user interface all the time. This is a P0 for us. And so I had to stop my hacking activities and declare an incident and figure out what's going on. And so while we were troubleshooting this, David discovered that there's a variable called max Prolog database size, and that the default is 256, and that if you go over the limit, then some part of the code throws an exception, and that exception ends up in our log. And so we increased this number, but the lesson from this is that we don't really want to know about, so we don't know Prolog, and we also don't want to know about the infrastructure that interprets it and has these arcane settings. Okay, so Prolog, in summary. In theory, it looks like a good solution to the problem that we have. It's logic programming. You can write nice rules, but in practice, it's a disaster because no one knows Prolog. And so what happens is that people that are administrators, they go looking on the internet, they post on Stack Overflow, they post questions on Stack Overflow, and then they cut and paste the result. Actually, this question pointed back to our documentation. Our documentation has an example already. And so my team, what happens if someone comes with a question on Prolog, we try to not look at it as long as we possibly can, but then at some point someone forces us to, and then some poor soul in the team has to pick up a book on Prolog again, spend 2 or 3 hours to understand how it worked again, debug it, provide the solution, and then forget about it for another half year because this is how often this occurs. And so the conclusion is that we really have to get rid of this stuff. So we want to throw Prolog out, but so this is a fun fact. This is a picture from a company that specializes in taking out windows when you want to move furniture. Okay, so this is common in written. I thought the picture was quite funny. It's normal in the UK. Anyway, so if you want to get rid of the couch, you can either throw it through the window, but then the window breaks, it makes a mess. People are unhappy, and so we can't do that. We have to do it with care. And so how do we do it with care? Well, we just take the code that we have and we insert an interface in the middle, and then hopefully we can swap out the Prolog interpreter will satisfy the interface, and we can swap it out later for something else. And so what Maxine did is provide something called submit rule, which takes project configuration, it takes a change, and then returns something called submit record. So submit records, they can be labels, and so labels can be okay or not satisfied. But he also added something else, which is requirements. And so this can be something that is not a label, but it's still something that you have to address. For example, we have something called resolve all comments. You cannot submit something until you have at least acknowledged that you have seen a comment. And that's not a label, but it is a requirement. And then we worked with a UI designer to figure out how to display this. I think in the end we went with this over here. So that the labels are in green with the little V marks, and then the non-label requirements have a hourglass, meaning that we're still waiting on it. And so you can now write rules in Java. So Dave already mentioned this yesterday. Here I have another example about rejecting self-approvals. Anyway, so the self-approval, it has like a description of what this is all about. Then there's actual code that looks whether there's a self-approval or not. And if it finds something that is wrong, it will return this as a submit record. And so we put this into a plugin. So what rules do we want to have? Well, we want to force people to resolve their comments, and we want to have labels be configured in a nice way with buttons, because if it doesn't have buttons, people don't understand it. And it's a plugin, and so I think I have a demo here. Yes. So here you see that this change that I made myself was approved, but it's still not submittable because the comments have to be resolved. Now, if you don't like this, you can change the configuration. And so here you see the configuration. So, so we have implemented this. And so it works. So once this is live for all of our hosts inside Google, we won't have to debug Prolog anymore, and that's great. Of course, there's a lot of downsides as well. So it's written in Java. It's part of so if people want to have new rules, they actually have to write Java code, and the Java code is then compiled into our server binary, which takes, I don't know, a couple of days to roll out, and if there's a problem, we have to roll it back. So it's not very flexible. And it's also a process that doesn't scale because every Gerrit admin, of which we have 500 inside Google, writes their own little piece of Java, then we have to deal with 500 pieces of Java. So it doesn't scale, but it doesn't scale as badly as debugging Prolog. Conclusion. If we want to scale our support load, we have to make things simpler. We have new infrastructure here. It's available in 2.16, where the Prolog interpreter is abstracted away. And we have a new plugin that actually gives you a nice UI to configure things. So this is all work by Maxime Guerrero. And if you want to download it, it's available from googlesource.com. There's an obvious next step, which is to move the Prolog interpreter out of Gerrit core and provide maybe other languages that are more flexible. So one demo that our intern also did was to write submit rules in JavaScript. So maybe we'll continue that work.
So some other plugins provide Prolog rules for availability, such as owner's plugin. There may be additional ones. If we write a plugin using this new scheme, can we somehow make use of the rules that another plugin has, or would we have to rewrite those pieces?
So with regards to the owner's plugins, this is exactly what we were waiting for. So it means that nobody is having any fun, any, let's say, joy in writing the Prolog rules for the owner's plugin. And typically people, they were just, as you said, copy and pasting from the plugin documentation into the code. And whenever they were changing something, it didn't work. So they stick with that one. So the answer is definitely in 2.16, the new owner's plugin will basically implement this stuff. It would not require to write any Prolog rules. maybe you can answer the general question about the others. But owners definitely no more Prolog stuff.
Yeah, actually, we wanted to move Prolog out of core as part of the intern project, but it turned out to be more difficult because of exactly the thing you're asking. Some plugins can provide Prolog rules, and so in order to move Prolog out, we would have to build infrastructure where one plugin can provide functionality to other plugins, and we thought that that would open such a big can of worms that we didn't want to do it. So our hope is that everyone will stop writing Prolog and move to this new thing, and then we will move this out of Gerrit core.
So then the thing would be if I needed to tailor the owner's plugin rules, I'd need to go into that plugin and tweak it or provide some patches upstream. Okay, thanks.